My ex-boyfriend Vernon and I had a fundamental, core disagreement about the very nature of reality and what it means to build a life with another human being. I am not being dramatic when I say that. I truly, deeply believe that if you live in someone else's house, if you eat the food they buy with their hard-earned money, and if you use the internet connection they pay for every single month, you are in a partnership. You are a team. You are in it together, navigating the daily challenges of life side by side, supporting each other. Vernon, on the other hand, genuinely believed he was a celestial body. He walked around with the unearned confidence of a blazing sun, and he treated me like I was just some small, insignificant planet lucky enough to be caught in his gravitational pull. Let me give you a little background before I get into the main event, because context is everything. We had been together for 3 years. 3 whole years of my life. And for the last 8 months of that time, he had been living in my house. And when I say my house, I want to be perfectly, crystal clear with all of you. My name is the only name on the mortgage document. My name is on the water bill, the electric bill, the gas bill, and the internet bill. My bank statements show very clearly that my salary as a senior graphic designer is what pays for every single piece of wood, drywall, and glass in that building. Getting this house was not an easy journey for me. The down payment came from a small inheritance my grandmother left me. I still remember the day of her funeral. The sky was a heavy, unforgiving gray. We stood around the cemetery, the cold wind biting at our coats, and I felt a profound sense of loss. She was the woman who taught me how to bake, how to stand up for myself, and how to spot a liar. A few weeks after the funeral, I found myself sitting in a stuffy, quiet room with dark oak panels, listening to an older lawyer read her final will and testament. When the lawyer told me about the money, I just sat there and cried. Originally, she had started saving that money as a college fund for me when I was just a little girl, putting away $20 here and $50 there. But when I managed to get a full scholarship, she kept saving it. She saved her pennies for decades, just so I could have a secure future. This house is not just a piece of real estate to me. It is not just an investment property. It is her legacy. When I walk through the halls, I feel her looking out for me. It is my absolute sanctuary from the harsh, noisy world outside. Or, at least, it was supposed to be. Vernon moving in was not a decision we made together like mature adults. We never sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of hot coffee and discussed our future. We never talked about how we would split the finances, what our boundaries were, or what our expectations for the relationship going forward would be. He moved in bit by bit, like a slow-moving tide, creeping up the beach. It started innocently enough, just like it always does. One morning, he left a blue plastic toothbrush in my bathroom holder. I saw it there, right next to mine, and I smiled. It felt like a sweet step forward. 2 weeks later, he asked for a single drawer in my dresser so he could leave some gym clothes over. I cleared out my winter sweaters and gave him the bottom drawer. Then, one rainy Friday evening, he brought over a heavy canvas duffel bag. He dropped it heavily at the foot of my bed, sighed, and said his apartment was having plumbing issues. That duffel bag just never left. He never officially moved out of his place, but he stopped going there. At first, I will admit, it felt nice. It felt cozy and warm. I would come home from a long, stressful day of staring at bright computer screens, fighting with clients over color palettes, and meeting tight design deadlines, and he would be there. I would unlock the door, and the house would not be empty. He would be sitting on my couch, playing his video games, the television glowing in the dim room. He would pause the game, look up, and say, "Hey, how was work?" It was a physical presence in the house. I made the massive, heartbreaking mistake of confusing that physical presence with an actual partnership. The truth is, I am a very easygoing woman. I like my quiet, structured life. I work from home most of the week, sitting in my upstairs office with a cup of green tea. I have a small, tight-knit circle of girlfriends I have known for decades. We do not go out to loud clubs or crowded bars. My idea of a perfect, Wild Friday night is trying a new brand of frozen pizza, maybe a supreme or a fancy margarita, pouring a generous glass of red wine, and binge-watching a British mystery television show in my comfortable flannel pajamas. I like things calm. I like things predictable and safe. Vernon was the exact opposite. His life was a constant, loud performance, and his dedicated audience consisted of his three best friends. I privately referred to them as the Parasite Brothers. Their names were Roland, Floyd, and Silas. Roland was the loud one. He was the self-appointed alpha of their little pack, the kind of man who never closed a kitchen cabinet door after opening it and always spoke at a volume suitable for a crowded football stadium. Floyd was the quiet, cynical one. He rarely contributed anything meaningful to a conversation, but he always had this irritating, superior smirk on his face, like he knew a secret joke that you did not. Silas was basically a shadow. He had no opinions of his own. He just went along with whatever Roland and Vernon wanted to do, nodding his head enthusiastically and laughing on cue. These three grown men were Vernon's entire world. And slowly, painfully, they started to become a permanent fixture in my world, too. I started to feel like a stranger walking through my own hallways. My quiet, peaceful sanctuary became their default weekend clubhouse. Early on in our relationship, when things were still new and shiny, Vernon had bought me this little wooden plaque to hang by the front door. It said the Wilsons in curly, rustic letters. He thought it was a cute, romantic gesture, hinting at a future together where we shared a last name. But looking at it lately, as the sound of their violent video games and shouting echoed through my drywall, it just seemed wildly, painfully optimistic. It was a fake promise of a life we were not actually building. We were just coexisting under one roof, and I was the only one opening my wallet to fund the operation. The grocery bills tripled. The electricity bill spiked. I was buying cases of soda and snacks that I never even got to taste. The cracks in our relationship were turning into massive sinkholes, and I seemed to be the only one tripping over them. Living with Vernon was difficult enough on its own. Living with Vernon and his three sidekicks was an absolute nightmare. It felt exactly like I had inherited 3 extra college roommates, none of whom contributed a single dime to the household expenses. My beautiful, calm space, the space I had worked so hard to decorate and maintain, became the designated hangout spot simply because I had the biggest television and a fully stocked refrigerator. I remember one particular Sunday afternoon that really set the stage for the end. It is burned into my memory. I had spent my entire Sunday morning doing a deep, restorative clean of the house. You know the kind of cleaning I mean. I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the white baseboards until my knuckles ached. I washed the living room windows until the glass sparkled in the afternoon sun. I mopped the hardwood floors, and the entire house smelled like fresh lemon polish and clean linen. I had even gone to the local farmer's market that morning and bought a beautiful, vibrant bouquet of yellow sunflowers. I arranged them perfectly in a glass vase on the center of my reclaimed wood coffee table. I was physically exhausted, my back was aching, but my mind was at total peace. I made myself a cup of herbal chamomile tea and was looking forward to a completely silent evening reading a new hardcover novel I had just bought. I had barely settled onto the living room sofa, pulling a soft knitted throw blanket over my legs, when I heard the heavy clunk of a key turning in the front door lock. The door swung open, hitting the wall stopper with a loud thud. In walked Vernon. Right behind him, trailing like a pack of hungry wolves, were Roland, Floyd, and Silas. They were carrying heavy cardboard cases of cheap domestic beer and 4 massive, greasy pizza boxes. Vernon did not even look at me apologetically. He did not ask if it was a good time. He did not ask if I had plans. He just dropped his heavy metal keys on the entryway table, scratching the wood, and announced his plans. "Babe, the game is on," he said brightly. "Roland's television is busted, so we are watching the playoffs here." He stated it as if it were the most natural, undeniable fact in the universe. He simply informed me of my reality. He walked right past me, carrying the pizza into the living room. For the next 4 hours, my living room was an active war zone. The shouting directed at the television screen was absolutely deafening. Every time a referee made a call they did not like, Roland would jump up and scream at the top of his lungs. I tried to read my book, but the noise was vibrating right through my skull. I grabbed my novel and my lukewarm tea and retreated to my home office upstairs, shutting the heavy wooden door firmly. But it did not help much. Even with the door closed, I could hear them groaning, cursing, clinking glass bottles together, and stomping their heavy feet on my floorboards. When the game finally ended around 8 o'clock that evening, I heard the front door slam shut. I waited 5 minutes to make sure they were gone, and then I cautiously walked downstairs. The scene in my living room was devastating. My beautiful, clean sanctuary was completely gone. The 4 greasy pizza boxes were stacked haphazardly right on top of my reclaimed wood coffee table. They had completely pushed my vase of sunflowers to the edge, crushing several of the yellow petals. I could see the dark, shiny grease seeping through the bottom of the cardboard directly onto the expensive wood finish. Empty, foul-smelling beer bottles were scattered everywhere. They were rolling on the floor, leaving wet rings on the side tables, and even wedged between the sofa cushions. There were crumpled napkins and half-eaten pizza crusts discarded on paper plates. But the absolute worst part was the rug. A few weeks prior, I had finally received a wonderful promotion at work. It was a major bump in my salary, a validation of all my late nights and hard work. I had celebrated that promotion by treating myself to a beautiful, thick, cream-colored area rug for the living room. It tied the whole space together perfectly. Right in the dead center of that beautiful new rug was a massive, sticky, dark puddle of spilled cherry soda. It had soaked deep into the light fibers. And they were all gone. Vernon and his friends had vanished to a local sports bar to celebrate the game's outcome, leaving the absolute carnage behind for me to deal with. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just stood there, looking at the stain. Then, I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a plastic bucket, filled it with hot water and carpet cleaner, and grabbed a stiff scrub brush. I spent the next hour on my hands and knees, scrubbing out a sticky stain made by 4 grown men. My hands were shaking. They were not shaking from the physical exertion, but from a deep, quiet, burning rage that was boiling right in the center of my chest. When Vernon finally stumbled through the front door much later that night, it was past midnight. He smelled strongly of stale beer, cheap fried food, and cheap cologne. He was humming a song to himself, completely oblivious to my mood. I was sitting in the kitchen, waiting for him. I decided I needed to address it right then and there. I kept my voice incredibly calm. I was reasonable. I did not raise my tone. I wanted to have an adult conversation. Vernon, I started, standing up and gesturing toward the hallway and the now spotless living room. We need to talk about tonight. I love that you have your friends. I really do. It is healthy to have a social life. But this is my home, too. I cannot be the one constantly cleaning up these huge messes after you all leave. Look at the coffee table. Look at the rug. Could you please ask Roland and the others to be a little more respectful of the space? Or maybe you guys could take just 10 minutes to pitch in and clean up your trash before you head out to the bar. He stopped taking off his heavy winter jacket. He just stood there with one arm in the sleeve, looking at me. His face was completely blank, as if I were speaking a foreign language he had never heard before. Then, he let out this short, dismissive little laugh. It was a sound that instantly grated on my nerves. Maxine, babe, come on, he said, waving his free hand in the air as if swatting away an annoying fly. They are just guys. It is what we do. We get loud. We eat. It was just a little mess, a few boxes. You are overreacting. What is the big deal? I just stared at him. What is the big deal? The big deal was that I could feel my home, my safe place, slipping right through my fingers. The big deal was that I felt more like a live-in maid, a janitor, and a caterer than a respected partner. The big deal was the complete and utter lack of basic human respect for my time, my property, and my feelings. But I did not say any of those words out loud. I was too tired. The exhaustion was deep in my bones. I just stood there in the hallway, watching him kick off his heavy boots. He did not put them on the shoe rack. He left them right dead in the center of the walkway, exactly where I would trip over them if I got up for a glass of water in the middle of the night. That night, I climbed into bed next to him. He fell asleep instantly, snoring softly into his pillow. I lay awake for hours staring at the dark ceiling. I listened to the sound of his breathing, and I felt a deep, chilling loneliness settle into my bones. Even with another human being breathing right next to me, the space between us on that mattress felt as wide, dark, and deep as a canyon. I knew in my gut that something had to break. I just did not realize how soon the breaking point would arrive. The moment that changed the entire trajectory of my life happened a few days later, on a Thursday evening. The work week had been incredibly stressful. I was pushing hard on a massive new design campaign for our biggest client. I was working late into the evening every single day, trying to justify that recent promotion and the new salary. By Thursday, I was mentally and physically drained. My eyes were burning from staring at the monitor. All I wanted in the world was a quiet, uneventful weekend to recharge my batteries, maybe sleep in until 9, and drink coffee on the porch. I decided to treat myself to some comfort food. I was standing in my kitchen, wearing comfortable gray sweatpants and an old t-shirt, making a rich tomato pasta sauce completely from scratch. It was the exact recipe my grandmother used to make for Sunday family dinners. There is a rhythm to making sauce that calms my nerves. Peeling the fresh garlic cloves, crushing the San Marzano tomatoes by hand, watching the olive oil shimmer in the hot pan. Smelling the sweet basil and oregano filling the warm air in the kitchen, it was my little ritual. It was my personal way of washing the heavy stress of the corporate world right down the kitchen drain. I was standing at the stove, slowly stirring the bubbling sauce with a wooden spoon, when Vernon waltzed into the kitchen. I noticed immediately that he was not wearing his usual lounging clothes. He was freshly showered. I could smell the sharp, piney scent of his expensive cologne. He was dressed in a crisp, ironed button-down shirt, dark-fitted jeans, and nice boots. He was not dressed for a quiet Thursday night on the couch eating pasta. He was holding his smartphone pressed tightly to his ear, pacing back and forth across my kitchen floor. He had a massive, excited grin plastered across his face. He was in the middle of a very loud, very animated, one-sided conversation. "Oh man, yes, I am absolutely in," he practically shouted into the phone, his voice booming and echoing off my kitchen tile. "A guy's weekend away is exactly what I need right now. Work has been killing me." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. Then he rolled his eyes, let out a loud bark of laughter, and shook his head. "No, no, she is not coming. Do not be ridiculous, man. It is just for the boys." He ended the call, slipped the phone into his front pocket, and finally looked at me. His face was beaming, glowing with the kind of pure joy a child has when opening a present on Christmas morning. "Good news," he announced, clapping his hands together loudly. "Roland, Floyd, Silas, and I are going up to a cabin at the lake for the weekend. We rented a boat. We are leaving tomorrow afternoon right after work." I stopped stirring the sauce. I let the wooden spoon rest on the edge of the pot. This was the very first time I was hearing a single word about this trip. He did not bring it up earlier in the week as a discussion. He did not ask if we had any plans for the weekend, or if there was anything I needed help with around the house. It was a firm, unyielding declaration of his plans. I stood there, feeling the heat from the stove on my stomach. The wooden spoon suddenly felt very heavy in my hand. I took a deep breath, fighting down the immediate, sharp spike of annoyance, and tried my hardest to play the role of the cool, understanding, supportive girlfriend. "Oh, okay," I said, forcing my voice to stay even and light. "That sounds like a fun time. A cabin trip will be good for you." Then, I asked a question. It was a simple, basic, logistical question. It was the kind of question that any normal human being in a committed relationship might ask their partner when they announce they are leaving town for 3 days. "Which lake are you all heading up to?" I asked, looking back down at the bubbling red sauce, ready to resume stirring. Vernon stopped smiling. The joy instantly vanished from his face. He looked at me as if I had just asked him to explain the intricate details of a nuclear submarine. He stared at me for 3 full seconds, his brow furrowed, and then he let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Right at that exact moment, the back door of my kitchen swung open. It was Roland. He walked right in without knocking, exactly as he always did, making himself entirely at home in my house. He had a 6-pack of beer under his arm. Vernon turned to Roland immediately, pointing a finger directly at me with a look of pure, unadulterated mockery on his face. "Can you believe her, Roland?" Vernon said, shaking his head and rolling his eyes dramatically for his audience. "She actually wants to know where I am going. She wants an itinerary." Roland let out a loud scoff. He set the beer on my kitchen island, crossed his muscular arms, and looked me up and down. He looked at me the exact way you would look at an old, broken chair you were considering throwing into the dumpster. I felt the blood rush to my face. My cheeks burned hot. My heart started beating faster in my chest. This was happening right here, in my own kitchen, surrounded by the smell of my grandmother's recipe, in the house that I paid for. Vernon then turned his attention back to me. He planted his feet wide, put his hands firmly on his hips in a posture of complete dominance, and delivered the line. It was the line that would echo in my head for days. It was the line that became the absolute catalyst for every single thing that happened next. He looked down his nose at me, his voice dripping with heavy, suffocating condescension. "Maxine, stop acting like we are married. You do not get a say in where I go or who I am with." And then, they laughed. Both of them laughed right in my face. And it was not just them. I looked toward the hallway and saw that Floyd and Silas had walked in through the front door, following Roland. The 4 of them, my boyfriend and his 3 grown-man parasites, stood in my brightly lit kitchen and laughed at me. It was a terrible, humiliating symphony of derision. They genuinely, truly thought this was the peak of comedy. A woman, standing in a house she owned, paying for the electricity lighting the room, being told she had absolutely no right to ask a simple question about her live-in boyfriend's weekend plans. It was just hilarious to them. I stood frozen, gripping the wooden spoon so tightly my knuckles turned white. I watched a single drop of hot red pasta sauce fall from the spoon and hit my clean floor with a soft splat. And right then, in that exact second, a miracle happened. I did not get mad. I did not yell. I did not throw the wooden spoon at his head. I did not start a screaming match or demand respect. Something strange and incredibly powerful shifted inside my chest. A deep, zen-like calm washed over my entire body, starting from the top of my head and flowing right down to my toes. It was like walking out of a loud, chaotic room into a quiet, cool garden. It was as if a heavy, rusted switch had finally been flipped in my brain. The part of my soul that had been trying so desperately hard to make this uneven relationship work, the part that constantly made excuses for his bad behavior, the part that scrubbed pizza grease off tables and bit her tongue to keep the peace, that part of me just quietly packed her bags, put on her coat, and walked right out the door. She was completely done. She had officially retired from duty. I looked up from the spot of red sauce on the floor. I looked directly into Vernon's smug, smiling face. The face I used to look at with genuine love and affection. And I just smiled right back at him. It was a big, bright, friendly, and completely empty smile. "You know what, Vernon?" I said. My voice was full of a cheerful, light agreement that seemed to surprise even me. It did not shake at all. "You are 100% correct. That is my mistake." The 4 men laughed again, even louder this time. They thought I was retreating. They thought they had put me in my place, that I was backing down and admitting defeat to the mighty alpha male. Vernon walked over to me, reached out, and gave me a condescending little pat on the cheek. It was a physical gesture meant to placate a confused toddler, not a grown woman. "Good girl," he muttered, grabbing a beer from the six-pack Roland brought in. And then, in a flurry of loud voices, laughter, and heavy footsteps, they all swept out of my kitchen and out the back door, heading off to some pre-weekend bar gathering to plan their trip. The back door clicked shut, leaving me completely alone in the sudden, ringing silence of my house. I stood in the center of the kitchen for a very long time. I did not move a muscle. The only sound in the entire house was the gentle, rhythmic bubbling of the red sauce simmering on the stove. I reached out and turned the burner off. The fire died down. I was not hungry anymore. I walked slowly out of the kitchen and began to wander through the house. My house. I walked into the living room and saw his heavy winter jacket thrown carelessly over my favorite armchair. I saw his massive, chaotic pile of video game cases stacked messily next to my television. I saw his dirty sneakers kicked off by the front door, scuffing the white baseboard. I saw his ugly, gray throw pillows scattered on the sofa. I looked at all his clutter, and I did not feel a single ounce of anger. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully clear-headed. "Okay," I said aloud to the empty living room. My voice was steady and strong. "Not married?" "No say." A new, much more interesting plan was beginning to form in the back of my mind. It was a plan that felt like witnessing a beautiful, bright sunrise after a long, freezing, dark night. "I got it," I whispered into the quiet room. I realized right then that the upcoming weekend was going to be an incredibly fun and productive time after all. It was just not going to be fun for him. I went upstairs, washed my face, brushed my teeth, and got into bed early that Thursday night. I slept more soundly and deeply than I had in 8 long months. The agonizing decision about whether to end this relationship had been made for me, by him. All I had to do was graciously agree to his terms. The heavy, suffocating weight I did not even realize I had been carrying on my shoulders was suddenly lifted. I was about to take my life, my home, and my dignity back, and I was going to start first thing Friday morning. The very second Vernon's oversized, obnoxiously loud pickup truck, presumably packed to the brim with beef jerky, cheap beer, and fishing gear, disappeared around the corner of my street on Friday afternoon, I sprang into immediate action. But my first move was not grabbing trash bags or packing boxes. My first move was a highly calculated mission of strategic importance. I walked out my front door, went down my front porch steps, and walked directly across the lawn to my next-door neighbor's house. My neighbor is a wonderful gentleman named Mr. Wallace. He is a widower in his late 80s. He is a retired high school drama teacher with a brilliant, sharp mind, a twinkle of mischief in his bright blue eyes, and a beautifully manicured yard full of prize-winning rose bushes. He and his late wife had been happily married for over 50 years. After she passed away, I made it a regular habit to check in on him. I would bring him freshly baked muffins on Sunday mornings, help him carry his heavy groceries from the car, or just sit on his front porch swing with him to chat about the world. He was like a grandfather figure to me. He was a deeply kind soul, but he also possessed a neighborhood surveillance network that would make the federal government jealous. Absolutely nothing happened on our quiet suburban street without Mr. Wallace knowing the exact details of who, what, when, and why. I walked up his paved brick path carrying a small plate of the oatmeal raisin cookies I knew he loved. He was on his porch, wearing a thick cardigan sweater, watering a hanging fern with a small copper watering can. I handed him the plate and sat down on the wooden porch swing. "Mr. Wallace," I said, after we had exchanged our pleasantries and discussed the ongoing battle he was fighting with the local squirrels digging in his flower beds. "I have a bit of a situation on my hands, and I find myself in need of your specific talents. It involves a small bit of neighborhood theater." His watery blue eyes lit up instantly. The man loved drama more than he loved his roses. He set the watering can down, took a cookie from the plate, and sat down in the wicker chair opposite me, leaning in closely. "Tell me everything, Maxine," he said softly. I laid it all out for him. I explained the disrespect, the mess, the endless stream of uninvited guests, and the absolute entitlement. And then, I told him Vernon's exact words from the night before. I did not have to embellish a single syllable. The unvarnished truth was damning enough. He looked me in the eye, in my own kitchen, and said, "Stop acting like we are married. You do not get a say in where I go or who I am with," I told him, watching the reaction on his face. By the time I finished my story, Mr. Wallace was gripping the armrests of his wicker chair. A look of righteous, theatrical fury was spreading across his gentle, wrinkled face. He shook his head slowly. He actually mentioned a bitter divorce and custody battle his own parents went through when he was a young boy. He told me how that childhood trauma had taught him early on that a man who does not respect a woman's home, or the peace she provides, does not deserve a place in it. That shameless, arrogant young man, Mr. Wallace declared, his voice taking on the rich, booming baritone of a stage actor projecting to the back row of an auditorium. Living under your roof. Eating the food you work hard to buy. And speaking to you with such profound disrespect. Do not you worry for a single second, Maxine, my dear. You leave this part entirely to me. Tell me, what is my motivation, and what are my lines? I gave him a very simple, direct script. I told him that when Vernon returned on Sunday evening, he would inevitably find himself locked out of the house. When that happened, Mr. Wallace was to step outside onto his porch, act confused as an innocent neighbor, and deliver a few key pieces of devastating information. Mr. Wallace took to the assigned task with the fiery enthusiasm of a seasoned Broadway actor preparing for opening night. He even pulled a small, worn notepad and a pen out of his shirt pocket to take notes. "Let us see here," he muttered to himself, scribbling quickly on the paper. "Found her freedom. Not married. Oh, this is delicious, my dear. Simply delicious. I will give him a performance he will never forget." With my crucial accomplice secured and ready for his cue, I thanked him, left the plate of cookies on his table, and walked back across the lawn to my house. I walked inside, closed my front door, and leaned my back against the cool wood. I had a real, genuine smile on my face for the first time in weeks. It was time to begin what I had officially dubbed Operation Reclaim My Space. My beautiful home, for the last 8 months, had been a suffocating sea of masculine clutter, pointless sports memorabilia, and furniture that looked like it belonged in the waiting room of a depressing dental clinic. It was time to bring my territory back to life. It was time for a complete and total resurrection. I did not just start throwing things into trash bags. That would have been too chaotic, too frantic. I wanted this process to be methodical. I went out to the local hardware store and bought 24 heavy-duty cardboard packing boxes, 3 rolls of packing tape, and a thick black permanent marker. This was not just a weekend cleaning project. This was a ceremony. It was a formal eviction of a man who had treated my home like a cheap motel. I started in the primary bathroom. His side of the vanity was always a disaster zone. I opened the boxes and started curating his belongings. I did not fold anything. I did not organize. I just scooped. The half-empty bottle of that overly musky cologne he loved so much went into the first box. Then came his expensive electric razor, the endless tubes of hair gel, and the various facial creams he spent hours applying while I was downstairs cleaning up after his friends. I took my thick black marker and wrote on the side of the box in big, block letters, face gels and various scoops. The bedroom was my next target. His side of the walk-in closet was a massive, tangled explosion of wrinkled t-shirts, unwashed jeans, and jackets that smelled like stale smoke. I simply grabbed armfuls of the clothing and stuffed them down into the cardboard boxes. I pressed the clothes down to make room for more. I taped the top shut and wrote, "Everyday clothes, various stains." Next, I tackled the bottom of the closet. Vernon had a massive collection of very expensive, brightly colored sneakers. He was a man who complained about splitting the cost of a grocery bill but somehow always had $300 for a new pair of limited edition shoes. I threw every single pair into a large box and labeled it, "A Podiatrist's Nightmare." I worked my way through the house like a storm of cleansing energy. I felt a light sweat break out on my forehead, but I was not tired. I was energized. The living room was the biggest challenge. This was the epicenter of his parasitic existence. I gathered up his video game console, the towering stack of 50 different game cases, the tangled, confusing mess of controllers, and the charging wires. I dumped them all into a box and labeled it, "Toys for a Grown Man." Then, I looked at the couch. When he moved in, he had insisted on buying these incredibly depressing, stiff, gray and black throw pillows to make the room look more modern. They were uncomfortable and ugly. I threw them into a box with his dark winter blankets and labeled it, "Sad Beige Things." By Saturday morning, every single trace of his physical existence in my house was boxed up, taped shut, and stacked neatly in a towering mountain of cardboard right by the front door. It was a monument to a relationship that had completely run its course. I did not want his belongings sitting on my front lawn. I did not want to look at them for a second longer than necessary. So, I opened an app on my phone and hired a local moving company. 2 strong guys arrived right on time at 10 in the morning. They were professional, highly efficient, and they did not ask a single question about why a woman was eagerly shipping out 30 boxes of men's clothing and electronics on a Saturday morning. I drove my car and followed their large moving truck to a self-storage facility a few miles away, right near the highway. I had rented a 10 by 10 foot storage unit. I paid for 1 full month in advance with my own credit card. I considered it a very generous, non-marital gesture. I stood there and watched the movers stack the boxes inside the metal unit. Face gels went on top of Sad Beige Things. When they were done, I thanked them, tipped them well, and pulled the heavy metal door down. The latch clicked into place. I snapped a heavy brass padlock onto the door. As I drove my car away from the storage facility, leaving his entire material life behind a locked metal door, I felt incredibly light. The steering wheel felt lighter in my hands. The air coming through the air conditioning vents felt cleaner and colder. The sun shining through the windshield seemed brighter than it had in months. I drove back to my house, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. The house was a completely blank canvas. It was so quiet. And now, the real fun could begin. It was time to bring Maxine back into this home. With the house entirely cleared of all of Vernon's dark, heavy belongings, I felt a massive surge of creative energy. I had not felt this inspired in months. This was not just about redecorating a living room. It was about reclaiming my personal identity, my taste, and my very essence. I had allowed myself to be slowly buried under a pile of gray pillows and sports magazines, and I was clawing my way out. I went on a shopping spree. But it was not frantic, and it was not impulsive. It was deliberate and joyful. Every single item I purchased that weekend was something I genuinely loved. Something Vernon would have rolled his eyes at and called silly. First to go was his sterile, incredibly uncomfortable black leather sofa. I took 3 pictures of it, posted it on an online marketplace, and sold it in 20 minutes to a college student who came with a borrowed truck and hauled it away. He was thrilled with the deal, and I was thrilled to see it go out the door. I drove to a beautiful furniture boutique downtown. I walked straight up to a gigantic, cozy sectional sofa covered in a deep, rich emerald green velvet. I sat down on it, and it was soft and inviting. It was big enough to curl up on with a good book and a warm blanket. I bought it on the spot and paid for same-day delivery. Next, I tackled the coffee table. Vernon's sad, minimalist metal table was replaced by a stunning, heavy reclaimed wood table I found at a local artisan market. The wood was warm, it had character and history in its grain. I placed it in front of the green sofa. I set down a stack of large art books, and right in the center, I put a fresh ceramic vase filled with bright, cheerful yellow sunflowers. The walls were next. I took down his framed, dark posters of grim-looking action movie heroes. I wrapped them in trash bags and put them in the garage. In their place, I hung vibrant, colorful abstract paintings I had purchased from local artists over the years but never had the courage to display. I even went to the hardware store, bought a gallon of warm, sunny yellow paint, and spent my Saturday evening painting the accent wall in the living room. It instantly changed the entire feel of the space, bringing life and warmth back into the room. The bedroom underwent the most dramatic transformation. The heavy, dark blackout curtains he had insisted on so he could sleep until noon on weekends were taken down. I replaced them with light, airy linen curtains that let the morning sun stream in beautifully. I took down the weird, sharp geometric metal art piece he had hung over the headboard and replaced it with a large, intricately woven macrame wall hanging I had been admiring for months online. I bought a brand new duvet cover in a soft floral pattern, fresh pillows that actually supported my neck, and a soft, plush rug for the floor. I spent the rest of my Saturday putting everything together. I had my favorite classic rock music playing loudly from the speakers. I opened all the windows, letting the crisp, fresh air circulate through the house, blowing away the stale scent of his cologne. By the time I finished hanging the last picture, the house was completely transformed. It was no longer a dull showroom for a sad beige life. It was a fortress of glorious, unapologetic womanhood. It was my home again. It was warm, it was colorful, and most importantly, it was mine. But as I stood in the center of the living room, looking at the beautiful emerald green sofa, I realized there was just one more thing I needed to make it truly perfect. With the house feeling so wonderfully, liberatingly empty, I realized there was a different kind of void I wanted to fill. I did not want to fill it with a person. I wanted a presence. I wanted a loyal, loving, non-judgmental presence in my home. Early Sunday morning, I drove my car to the local county animal shelter. I told myself the lie we all tell ourselves, I was just going to look. I walked past the chain-link cages, the sound of barking echoing off the concrete walls. My heart ached for every single pair of sad, hopeful eyes that looked back at me. I saw big dogs jumping at the gates, small dogs cowering in the corners, energetic puppies, and sleepy seniors. And then, I walked down the very last aisle, and I saw her in the final kennel. A giant, fluffy creature lifted her massive head from her paws. She was a Bernese Mountain Dog. She had a beautiful, thick tricolor coat of black, white, and rust, and she had the kindest, gentlest, most soulful brown eyes I had ever seen in my life. I looked at the little plastic information card clipped to the front of her cage. Her name was Pearl. She was 2 years old. The card said her previous owners had to surrender her because they were moving into a small city apartment that did not allow large breeds. She weighed 120 pounds. She did not bark at me. She did not jump at the gate. She just sat there, looked right into my eyes, and thumped her heavy tail softly against the concrete floor. Thump, thump, thump. I found a volunteer and asked to meet her. The moment they let Pearl into the small, fenced visiting yard, she did not run around sniffing the grass. She walked right up to me, leaned her entire massive body heavily against my legs, and looked up at me. She let out a soft sigh, as if to say, "Well, it is about time you got here." I fell in love instantly. I filled out the adoption paperwork, paid the fee, and an hour later, I was driving home with a 120-pound ball of fur and unconditional love sitting proudly in my back seat. Pearl was not a small, delicate dog. She was a furry, drooling, incredibly lovable wrecking ball of pure joy. When we walked through the front door, she explored every single room with a quiet, calm confidence. She sniffed the new yellow paint, she investigated the kitchen cabinets, her tail wagging slowly the entire time. Then, she walked right over to my brand new, expensive emerald green velvet sofa. She hopped her heavy body up onto the cushions, circled 3 times, let out a deep groan of satisfaction, and fell fast asleep, snoring like a lumberjack. She had claimed the house, the sofa, and my heart as her own. I spent the rest of my Sunday playing fetch with Pearl in the backyard, laughing as she awkwardly chased a tennis ball. I opened a bottle of good red wine, poured myself a glass, and sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop. I logged into my internet provider's portal. I changed the name of the Wi-Fi network to Pay Your Own Bills. I set the new password to Not Your Wife, LOL. If you've made it this far, please do me a favor, like the video and comment number 1 down below. It lets me know how awesome you are and shows that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement and truly motivates me. Drop that one so I can recognize you, and now, let's get back to my story. Sunday night rolled around. The air outside grew thick, dark, and quiet. I had made myself a nice, healthy dinner of baked salmon and roasted asparagus, something Vernon would have complained about endlessly. I was curled up on the green velvet sofa, a soft blanket over my lap. Pearl had her giant, heavy head resting right on my legs, her soft snores filling the quiet living room. The storm was coming. Vernon and his parasites were due back from their lake trip at any time. But as I sat there sipping my wine, looking at my beautiful home and my sleeping dog, I felt completely, utterly prepared. I was not alone. I had my fortress, and I had my loyal guard. At exactly 9 o'clock, my phone, resting on the reclaimed wood coffee table, vibrated loudly. A notification popped up from my video doorbell camera app. There he was. I picked up the phone and opened the live feed. The camera showed Vernon strolling casually up the brick pathway to my front porch. He was wearing his fishing vest, looking slightly sunburned from his weekend at the lake. He was carrying a small duffel bag over his shoulder and he was literally humming a tune to himself. The comedy began almost immediately. He walked up to the front door, completely unaware that his entire world had been boxed up and shipped to a storage facility. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his heavy keychain, and stuck his house key into the lock. The key slid in smoothly, but when he went to turn it, it did not move. The brand new, high-security deadbolt I had paid a locksmith to install on Saturday morning was doing its job beautifully. Vernon jiggled the key. A look of mild annoyance flashed across his sunburned face. He pulled the key out, checked to make sure it was the right one, and shoved it back into the lock. He tried to turn it again, this time putting his weight into it. Nothing. It held firm. He let out an exasperated, loud sigh. He pulled the key out, shoved it into his pocket, and started banging his heavy fist against the solid wood door. "Maxine," he yelled, his voice muffled through the wood. "Open the door. The lock is stuck." From her spot on my lap, Pearl lifted her massive head. She looked toward the front door, let out a single, deep, rumbling woof that vibrated right through the floorboards, and then promptly laid her head back down and closed her eyes. She was utterly unbothered. Then, my cell phone started buzzing in my hand. The screen lit up with Vernon's name and a picture I had taken of him a year ago. I watched the phone vibrate. I took a slow, calm sip of my red wine, enjoying the rich flavor, and I pressed the red decline button. 10 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. He was calling back. I pressed decline again. This exact cycle repeated 5 times in a row. The banging on the front door got louder, much more frantic. I could see him on the camera feed. He was hitting the door with the flat of his hand now. "Maxine. Open the door," he yelled, his voice rising in panic and anger. "What is wrong with you? Let me in." I remained completely silent on the sofa. I did not move. I did not turn on any extra lights. This was all part of the show. This was his opening scene, and I was letting him have the stage all to himself. After another 5 minutes of increasingly desperate pounding on the door and ringing the doorbell repeatedly, he seemed to give up. The video camera showed him pacing back and forth across my front porch. He was running his hands through his hair in absolute frustration. He looked confused, he looked angry, and honestly, standing there in his fishing vest with his useless key, he looked a little pathetic. And then, right on cue, exactly as we had planned, a bright yellow porch light flickered on next door. I watched the camera feed closely. It was Mr. Wallace. He stepped out onto his porch, wearing a thick plaid house coat and holding his copper watering can, even though it was pitch black outside and his plants certainly did not need watering. "Showtime," I whispered to Pearl, rubbing her soft ears. The second act of our little neighborhood play was about to begin, and I had the absolute best seat in the house. "Oh, Vernon, dear boy, is that you over there?" Mr. Wallace called out into the dark night. His voice was an absolute masterpiece. It was the perfect, seamless blend of mild surprise and genuine neighborly concern. He shuffled slowly to the edge of his porch, leaning over the wooden railing and peering into the darkness. Vernon whipped his head around. "Mr. Wallace." "Thank God," Vernon said, rushing over to the edge of my porch, leaning toward the older man. He was clearly relieved to see a familiar face, thinking someone could help him. "I cannot get in. My key is not working. The lock is jammed or something." "Is Maxine home?" "Her car is in the driveway and I can see a light on in the living room." Mr. Wallace nodded sagely. He took a long, dramatic pause, holding the watering can perfectly still. "Oh, yes, Maxine is home," Mr. Wallace said, his voice full of warm, grandfatherly cheer. "She has had the most wonderful, productive weekend. A real transformation over there." Vernon stopped. His brow furrowed in deep confusion. "Transformation? What are you talking about? Did she break the lock?" Mr. Wallace leaned heavily on his porch railing, gesturing with his free hand, acting as if he were sharing a juicy, wonderful piece of neighborhood gossip. He lowered his voice conspiratorially, but kept it loud enough for the camera microphone to pick up every word. "Well, she came over and told me the good news," Mr. Wallace said brightly. "She said the two of you are not married. She said she does not get a say in anything you do, where you go, or who you spend your time with. So, she decided to celebrate her newfound freedom." Vernon just stared at the old man. His jaw physically dropped. His mouth was hanging open, catching flies. "She redecorated the entire house," Mr. Wallace continued, barely containing his theatrical glee. "She had a moving truck come on Saturday. It is a true woman's home now, she told me. Very vibrant. Very clean." The look on Vernon's face through the camera lens was an absolute masterpiece. It was a rapid transition from utter disbelief to dawning, terrifying horror. He took a step back from the railing, shaking his head. "And the best part," Mr. Wallace added, delivering his final line with the grand flourish of a true thespian. "She got a dog. A great, big, beautiful girl named Pearl. She said she wanted a companion in the house who was loyal, loving, and most importantly, did not talk back to her. Is not that just the sweetest thing?" That was the line that did it. I could see the exact moment the information finished processing in Vernon's brain. The gears finally clicked into place. He realized he had been evicted. He slowly turned away from Mr. Wallace. He walked back to my front door and pressed his face right up against the narrow glass window pane next to the door. From my vantage point on the sofa, I could see his face pressed against the glass, his eyes wide and panicked. He took in the entire scene. He saw the new yellow wall. He saw the reclaimed wood table. He saw the expensive emerald green velvet sofa. And right in the center of the sofa, occupying the exact spot where he used to sit and play his video games, he saw the giant, snoring Bernese Mountain Dog. Vernon let out a sound that was caught somewhere between a furious scream and a desperate sob. It was the distinct sound of a reality he thought he completely controlled shattering into a million sharp pieces right before his very eyes. Mr. Wallace's performance had been a stunning, award-winning success. I made a mental note to bake him an entire pie the next day. And now, it was time for the grand finale. After seeing the inside of the house and realizing his belongings were truly gone, Vernon ripped his smartphone out of his pocket. He started texting me. It was a furious, rapid-fire barrage of digital screaming. My phone lit up on the coffee table. The screen filled with a novel's worth of angry, all-caps messages. What did you do? Where is all my stuff? Let me in right now, Maxine. You are crazy. Open this door. That was when I decided to finally respond. I let him stew for another full minute, watching him pace frantically on the doorbell camera, kicking at the brick steps. Then, I picked up my phone. I opened the messaging app, and I typed out a single, simple text message. I made sure every word was perfect. You said to stop acting like we are married. You said I do not get a say. I agree with you completely. This is my house, I pay the mortgage, and you do not get a say in how I live in it. Since we are not married, I have returned your non-marital property to a secure location. The address is 123 Storage Way, down by the highway, Unit 42. The gate code and the padlock combination are both 1-2-3-4. I paid for 1 month. You have 30 days to get your things. Have a great life, Vernon. I hit send. The moment the little bubble confirmed it was delivered, I opened his contact profile. I hit block caller. I opened my social media apps. Blocked. 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 A complete and total digital amputation. He was erased from my phone. I looked back at the doorbell camera feed. I watched him read the text message. He stared down at his screen, the blue light illuminating his face in the dark. He read it once. He looked up at the window. He looked back down at the phone and read it again. Then, he let out a loud, visceral scream of pure, unadulterated rage. He raised his arm and threw his smartphone as hard as he could onto my front lawn. It bounced on the soft, damp grass with a pathetic little thud. It was a truly spectacular meltdown. He ranted and raved in the yard for another 10 minutes. He paced back and forth, kicking at the air, cursing my name loudly into the night sky, before his chariot finally arrived to save him. A pair of headlights swept across the lawn. It was Roland, pulling up in his loud, beat-up sedan to rescue his fallen king. Vernon stomped over to the grass, searched around in the dark to find his thrown phone, shoved it in his pocket, and climbed into the passenger seat of Roland's car. He slammed the car door so hard my windows rattled. Watching him finally get in that car and drive away down the street, the taillights fading into the distance, I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad. I did not shed a single tear. I just felt quiet. The show was officially over. The heavy velvet curtain had fallen. And in the silence of my living room, all I could hear was the gentle, rhythmic snores of the beautiful dog sleeping peacefully at my side. That sight, the sight of him completely losing control on the lawn that used to be ours, that was the exact moment I knew I was truly, finally free. The day after what I now fondly refer to as the Great Lockout, the expected social media campaign began. It was pathetic, but it was also entirely predictable. Vernon and the Parasite brothers started posting vague, dramatic stories on their Instagram and Facebook accounts. I had blocked Vernon, but my friends were sending me screenshots of the absolute circus. There were sad, black and white selfies of Vernon looking out car windows. There were quotes and song lyrics about deep betrayal and broken trust. Roland posted a long rant about the importance of cutting out toxic energy and how some people show their true colors when you least expect it. It was incredibly ironic coming from a group of men who left pizza grease on expensive furniture. They were trying so desperately to control the narrative. They wanted to paint me as the villain, the crazy, unhinged ex-girlfriend who kicked her loving, devoted boyfriend out onto the street for absolutely no reason while he was away on a harmless fishing trip. It was all so generic, they were using a paint-by-numbers kit for victimhood. I let them go on for about 2 days. I sat back and watched the little pockets of sympathy form from distant acquaintances and people who did not know the full story. I watched people comment, "Stay strong, bro," and "She didn't deserve you anyway." By Wednesday afternoon, I decided it was time to provide some much-needed context to the situation. I did not engage with them directly. I did not argue in the comment sections. I did not sink to their level of vague posting. Instead, I made a single post on my own private social media page, visible only to our mutual friends, family, and colleagues. It was a simple, 3-photo album. The first picture was a photo of my living room from a month ago. It showed the cold, black leather sofa, the sad gray pillows, the cluttered video games, and the general, depressing aura of a dentist's waiting room. The caption simply read, "Before." The second picture was a photo of my living room taken that very morning. The sunlight was pouring in through the linen curtains. It showed the glorious emerald green sofa, the colorful rug, the warm lighting, the sunflowers on the wood table, and right in the middle of it all, Pearl the Bernese Mountain Dog sprawled out on her back, looking absolutely majestic and ridiculous. The caption read, "After." The final picture was a selfie of me and Pearl sitting together on the new couch. I was wearing a comfortable sweater, holding a mug of coffee, and Pearl was licking my cheek. I was beaming. I looked happier, lighter, and more relaxed than I had in years. The caption for the album was simple, but it said everything that needed to be said to shut down their narrative entirely. Decided to do a little redecorating based on my new relationship status. It was recently brought to my attention in my own kitchen that I am not married, and therefore, I do not get a say in things or ask questions. So, I decided to fully embrace my newfound freedom. Hashtag no say no stay, hashtag dog is my co-pilot, hashtag bachelor pad no more, hashtag peace and quiet. The post was a digital nuclear bomb. The sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it, combined with the undeniable, overwhelming cuteness of Pearl, was a winning combination. My friends found it absolutely hilarious. The story, now provided with the proper context of Vernon's arrogant words, spread through our social circles like wildfire. People who had initially offered sympathy to Vernon were now seeing the full picture and deleting their comments on his page. The narrative was no longer psycho girlfriend kicks boyfriend out. It quickly became arrogant boyfriend tells girlfriend their relationship is a joke, is shocked when she believes him and changes the locks. Vernon and his friends went completely silent on social media. It is very hard to maintain a brooding victim narrative when the supposed villain is posting adorable pictures with her giant fluffy dog and everyone is laughing at you. The aftermath for Vernon was, from the gossip I heard through the grapevine, pretty rough. He crashed on Roland's couch that Sunday night. But that arrangement apparently lasted less than a single week. I guess Roland's girlfriend was not too thrilled about having a permanent, non-paying guest who complained loudly all the time and left his dirty socks on her coffee table. Vernon ended up having to pack up his 30 boxes from the storage unit and move back in with his parents in a small town 3 hours away. But he did not go down without one last, desperate fight. About 2 weeks after the lockout, I went to my mailbox and found a thick, certified letter. He had actually tried to come after me legally. The letter was from a local attorney he must have hired. It was full of threatening legal jargon, demanding immediate access to the house to retrieve his wrongfully held property, which was already in the storage unit, and demanding financial compensation for the severe emotional distress of being made suddenly homeless without proper eviction notice. I did not panic. I have a very sharp, very competent lawyer named Loretta. I had worked with her when dealing with my grandmother's estate and the inheritance. I called Loretta, drove over to her office, and handed her the threatening letter. Loretta read the letter, took off her reading glasses, and laughed out loud. She found the entire situation absolutely hilarious. "Leave this to me, Maxine," Loretta said, tapping her pen on her desk. She responded to Vernon's attorney with a very polite, professionally devastating package. The package contained a certified copy of my mortgage statement proving I was the sole owner, a copy of the utility bills in my name, a copy of the receipt for the paid storage unit holding his belongings, and a very friendly, formal inquiry. Loretta's letter essentially asked if Vernon would prefer to go to court, where we would be happy to countersue him for the 8 months of back rent, the shared utility costs, and the groceries he had consumed while living in my home as a non-married guest with no legal tenant rights or signed lease agreement. We never heard a single word from his lawyer again. The threat vanished into thin air. The funniest part of this whole ordeal, the moment that truly gave me closure, came about a month ago. I was at the large county dog park with Pearl. It was a beautiful, crisp Saturday afternoon. She was happily running across the grass, awkwardly chasing a tennis ball, and I was just sitting on a wooden bench, sipping a coffee and enjoying the sunshine on my face. A man approached the bench hesitantly. I squinted against the sun. It was Silas, the quietest member of the Parasite Brothers. He looked incredibly awkward. He had his hands shoved deep into his pockets and was kicking at the dirt. "Hey, Maxine," Silas said softly. I did not smile, but I did not yell at him either. "Hello, Silas." "Look," he started, staring at his shoes. I wanted to say I am sorry about that night at your house in the kitchen. We were totally out of line laughing at you. Roland gets going, and Vernon was showing off, and I should not have laughed. It was messed up." I took a sip of my coffee. I just shrugged my shoulders. "Vernon said what he said, Silas." I just took him at his exact word. He wanted to be a single man who answered to nobody. I gave him exactly what he asked for. "Yeah, I know," Silas said, shaking his head. "He is a lot to deal with right now. He called me last week complaining nonstop. His parents are making him pay rent and get a real job with normal hours. He said it was all your fault for ruining his life." Silas paused and looked out across the park. He watched Pearl, who was now currently trying to fit 3 different tennis balls into her massive mouth at the exact same time, her tail wagging furiously. "Honestly, Maxine," Silas said, turning back to me with a small, genuine smile. "It looks like you are doing just fine without him." And he was right. I am doing just fine. The house is no longer a dark, beige prison. It smells like lemon polish, fresh coffee, and occasionally, wet dog. It is my home. And Pearl is the absolute best roommate I have ever had. She is fiercely loyal, she is incredibly funny, she keeps my feet warm at night, and she never, ever complains about my cooking. I learned a very valuable, hard-earned lesson from all of this drama. Sometimes, the absolute best revenge you can get in life isn't plotting some grand, complicated, movie-style scheme. Sometimes, the best revenge is just turning off the noise, listening very closely to what people say about themselves, and believing them the very first time. Vernon looked me in the eye and told me exactly who he was and what our relationship meant to him. He told me I had no say in his life. I just decided to agree with him. He said I didn't get a say. And now, looking at his life from a distance, I truly don't. And in my beautiful, peaceful life, he doesn't have a say either. And that, combined with a giant, drooling, wonderful dog, is a pretty happy ending if you ask me. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It really means the world to share this and know I am not alone. Remember to protect your peace, ladies.